on our website. Anybody who wants to listen can listen. So, in these parshas that we're coming into in the Torah, Moses is discoursing to Israel, the new generation, the next generation, the generation that's going to go into the Holy Land. They're going to conquer it and they're going to settle it. And he's basically giving them a manual of what to do to set up society. And one of the commandments, there's a lot of commandments in a couple of weeks, and I'm always looking ahead in Kitei Tzei, that particular parsha has more commandments. It has the most commandments of any parsha in the whole Torah. Now, moving back a few weeks, there is a commandment, and maybe you remember it, at the end of the parsha that says, do not suffer a false prophet. Now, how do you know if it's a false prophet? Well, somebody that tells you to do something that's not in the Torah. And if they say, well, I have divine guidance, then there's a way to test them. And even then, you don't accept it. Because there's always a false prophet. There's always somebody who wants to tell you to do something that you really shouldn't do, or departs from your way of life. Now, where am I going with this? A lot of people look at the Torah and they see something that happened 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago, which it did. And it happened 3,500 years ago. And yeah, there's a lot of things about the offerings that we don't do anymore because there's not a Torah, there's not a temple. And I don't know that anybody really wants to go back to that anyway, because the temple was really kind of a big butcher shop when you get right down to it. But a lot of the prayers, a lot of the commandments, a lot of the mitzvot, the things that Torah tells us to do are timeless. So where does this go with the idea of a false prophet? I would submit to you that there are many false prophets today. And where are they? On social media. You have influencers. You have these so-called experts. Colleges are going broke. People are graduating from college that can't do math. And yet these influencers propose to tell you the truth. And a lot of the times when you look at some news channels, and there really aren't many news channels left, they're really news commentary. It just depends on what your point of view is, what you want to listen to, right? So they have some of these people on, and a lot of these people are just people that get angry, yell and scream in the microphone, rile people up, say stuff, and that's it. A lot of times you see what people say, and for me, I don't buy what they're selling anybody until I've researched it, until I've looked it up. Okay, somebody says something, and maybe some news outlet or a couple of news outlets report it. It doesn't seem right to me, so I'll look at a few others that are very different and see what they say. We see this with what's happening with our people, right? With Jews today. You know, some of the things that they're saying, demeaning Israel, when all we're trying to do is defend ourselves, things like that. But the point is, what do you do with false prophets? Okay, well, we're certainly not going to go out and kill anybody. That's kind of off the table. Not that anybody wants to do that anyway. Actually, the best way to assassinate these people is very simple. Turn off your computer. Done, right? You've eliminated them. So that's one way to do it. On the other hand, you still want to be able to know what the truth is. Sometimes that's very hard to do. But in Judaism, we have a history. This is part of who we are, is seeking the truth. That's why the Talmud takes 7 years and 4 months to read, because you have a lot of people with various opinions. For example, what do we learn about kashrut? Very simple, one sentence. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. And then there's a couple of places in the Torah, Exodus and Deuteronomy, where you get a whole laundry list of animals that you're not allowed to eat. Very simple, right? Okay, well, so you would think. Point is, how long do you wait if you can't eat milk and meat together? How long before you can eat milk after you've eaten meat? If you're Dutch, it's an hour. If you're Sephardic, Spanish, it's 3 hours. If you're Ashkenazi, Germanic, very strict, it's 6 hours. Which one is right? What are you? What's your ancestry? Spanish? Okay, 3 hours. Rabban Gamliel, who was a famous, I believe I have the right person, one of the famous Tanaim of the Talmud. These are the guys that were actually there when it was being written that posted their opinion. He actually let his disciples, his students, eat fowl, chicken, or turkey, or birds with dairy. Why? Because what does the commandment say? Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Birds don't wean their young. They lay an egg and that's it. So if you want to have a chicken salad sandwich with cheese, go for it. Right? Today, that, most people would frown on that. Okay? But that's how we interpret. Okay, we analyze, we look at it, we have a context, we have what they call today, I guess, a proof text. Is that the word? Okay, we have some type of way to research it. People don't do that. They listen to these people. They give into conspiracy theories, as outlandish or as logical as it sounds. And I'll tell you, I have a very strong background in mental health. I have a degree in psychiatric technology. I was a psychiatric technician at a psych hospital for 6 years, and I have a degree in psychology. Most of the people that are on these websites, that are on these sites, fit the criteria, and I kid you not, of paranoid schizophrenic. These are people that will give you a point of view. It sounds outlandish. And when you question it, they will run you around the ring explaining why it's real. Now, does that mean everybody's paranoid? No. It just means that people want the attention. Okay, why would somebody want to be a prophet? Because prophets are accorded, or they think they're accorded high honors. Not our prophets. Isaiah and Jeremiah, just ask them, man, they spent a lot of time in jail. They would say, you want to be a prophet? Go for it. But the point is this. We have to look at this commandment, the idea of a false prophet, and we have to question authority. We have to look into what people say and say, where did you get your information from? What research have you done? What is your background? If you're 22 years old and you're spouting this stuff, at 22, I'm not even going to tell you what I was like. You would not want to be standing up here, I'll tell you, right? But you have to question these things. And that's what Judaism tells us to do. This is why the concept of not accepting a false prophet and investigating it when somebody tells you something, you need to think for yourself. This is probably the best message. And if it doesn't jive with what you know, and I'm looking at this room, I'm seeing a lot of experience, a lot of good experience, then you know that something's up. So I think the message that we can take from this particular commandment is to do some research, not accept everything you see at face value, and make sure your sources are sound. And that's the way we're going to fix our world.